Ciao, Bellas. Welcome to another episode of Just Listen to Yourself with Kira Davis. I, of course, am Kira Davis, and I want to thank you for joining us on the program and here on the FCB Radio Network. August, as it turns out, was a record-setting ratings month for FCB Network. I'm so proud to be a part of this family, and you, the listener, made this show one of their highest debuting podcasts ever. So thank you so much. I'm thrilled to have you guys along for this ride. I hope I've spurred some conversations. Of course, if you're new to the podcast, let me tell you that this is a podcast where I ask you to take some of your talking points and some of your ideas about certain hot button cultural issues and draw those points out to their logical conclusion. Because I think we've become a nation of headline readers. And we all have a lot of talking points in our back pocket, a lot of ideas, feelings about certain issues, and we pull them out when we're having a debate or an argument with people. But we don't really think about what the things we say mean. Sometimes they don't mean what we think they mean. So I am taking this time to challenge you and me, challenge myself, to really consider what we're saying when we make certain arguments. So we've done a number of subjects on this show so far, but today we're going to end the abortion topic. I know some of you are like, okay, this is enough abortion talk. So this is episode 3. I try to keep them short. I'm going to try to keep this one short too. But it's such a big issue, and there are so many arguments and talking points around the issue that I really wanted to thoroughly take the time to take the most common talking points and challenge you on how you think about them. As always, I say this show isn't about lecturing, even though it's in a format where we can't have a natural back and forth. I'm not lecturing you. What I'm trying to do is persuade. What I want to do is to imagine that you and I are sitting at a table and we're having a drink. Maybe you're having coffee. Maybe I'm probably having scotch. And we're just bantering back and forth. We're just exchanging ideas. And we're each trying to persuade each other of our position. We've gotten away from persuasion, and now we're just arguing all the time and yelling at each other. We're making all these personal assumptions about each other based on what we believe. But it's my opinion that when you really dig into why people believe the things they believe, even if it's different from what you believe, it's not because they're a bad person. It's because they genuinely think that this is a position that will help people, that this is a position that's compassionate on either side of the issue. So I'd like to challenge all of you as we go through this exercise on this podcast, that you would argue in good faith. That means that when you sit down to a debate with someone, even if it's online, that you are not making assumptions about what kind of person that person is. That you're not automatically ascribing perverse motives to them based on their political point of view. That you're going to come to the table assuming that their intentions are good and then let them prove otherwise. That's arguing in good faith. We used to do that. That used to be the norm. And now that seems to have gone out the window. I'd love to bring that back. I'd love to bring it back. So abortion is a hot button topic. We've had 2 really great talks about the talking points. In the first episode of this series, I talked about the issue of where life begins and why I think that is imperative to the argument between pro-lifers and pro-choicers. And we talked about the value of life and who gets to decide what life is valuable and when it's valuable. You can go back and listen to that. That's part 1. Part 2, we talked about what kind of life will the child have. And I also addressed the talking point of you don't care about the baby after it's born. You only care about the baby till it's born, and then you don't care at all. So if you're curious about those issues and what I had to say on those talking points, go back and listen to part 2. This is part 3. I promised I was going to get here, and I don't think I'm going to make this one too long. It has to do with adoption, and then I want to talk about the implications for race when it comes for abortion, because I hear a lot of arguments from the pro-choice side that abortion is necessary in the minority community, particularly the Black community. I'll speak as a Black woman, that it is a right, and that if you oppose abortion, then you're a racist, which I just find laughable. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I think that that is a weak position. And let me persuade you. Just open your mind just for a little bit. Let's talk about adoption, though, really quick, because this is the other thing I see all the time. And I know you do, too. So I'm not making this up. I know you feel the same way that I do, that you've probably heard person after person after person, or maybe you've been involved in the argument and you've been talking to a pro-lifer and the pro-lifer says, well, just give them up for adoption. Just give the person up for adoption. Give the baby up for adoption. What's the big deal? Carry the baby, have the adoption. And often the pro-choicer will say, well, that's not fair to make that mother carry this burden. And then here's the talking point I want to address. And this is something I hear from the pro-choice side a lot when they talk to pro-lifers about adoption. They'll say a woman she could never give up her baby. I've heard women say this. I could never give up my baby. I could never have this baby and then give birth to it and then give it up to somebody else. But I feel like the argument's already been made before I start it, but I'm going to humor you guys and stretch it out anyway. To me, that is a weak argument at best, nonsensical. And I don't mean to be insulting about that, but just follow me out. It literally doesn't make sense to me, because what you're saying, first of all, this whole conversation is about the mom. So we're not really even talking about the baby. We're talking about from the mom's point of view. And what you're saying is, if I saw this baby and I held this baby and I smelled this baby and I looked into this baby's eyes, I will love this baby. I will love it. And I could never give it up to somebody else to be raised. So rather than having to go through the pain of seeing that baby move on to another family who might provide a more comfortable life or a different kind of life than I want the baby to have, I'm just going to make sure the baby's not born at all. That idea doesn't really tread water for me. Again, I kind of talked about this last episode about what about the life of the child? And it's like, well, yeah, what about the life of the child? You don't know what's going to happen. You can't place a value on that child's future. And when you say, well, I just could never give my child up for adoption, you're not even giving the child a future. You're placing the value on how you're going to feel when you see the child. And then there's the obvious, which is, I could never give my baby up for adoption, which is what you're saying is what's inside of me right now is a baby. And when I see it with my own eyes, I will know it's a baby. And then I will love it. And I don't want to love something that I have to give away. So it's better for that something to just not exist. That's exactly what you're saying. If you're saying, I could never give up my baby, that is what you're saying. You're saying that, just listen to what you're saying. You're saying that you already know you're going to love this life inside of you. You instinctively know that, to the point where you can't imagine parting from that child. So better to just part from the child while you can't see it, and then everything will be okay. So I don't find that argument very persuasive, and frankly, if I'm being honest, I find it a bit selfish, because pregnancy is, when you get to the end, it does feel like forever. It feels like you've been pregnant forever, but to carry a life for a few months out of your whole life, to give that child a shot at life, I don't know that that's the worst thing you can do. In fact, mothers who do that actually end up being grateful for the experience. A lot of times, I know my mom had a child when she was a teenager that we didn't know about until relatively recently. And he came back. He's older than me. He came before I did. She was in high school. And during that time, they were horrible to moms who were pregnant out of wedlock. I mean, they stuffed her away in a Catholic girls' home where they basically just treated her like dirt, and then took the baby before she could even see it, and they gave it to this American couple. And it turns out that was a big scandal up in Canada at that time. Basically, Canadian adoption agencies selling infants to wealthy American couples who were desperate for a child. My mom was a victim of that. So there was a time when, yes, single mothers and pregnant mothers were treated horribly. But these days, there is a lot more compassion, I believe, for moms out of wedlock. And it's almost received like a cultural acceptance. I mean, look at MTV, Teen Mom OG. I got the chance to co-host with Dr. Drew on KABC Radio in LA, and he is the resident counselor for Teen Mom OG. So he's got all kinds of good stories for over there. But I guess the point I was making is that in my mom's day, that was a different story, because she really was mistreated and used and abused, frankly, if you ask me. But these days, the process is a lot different. You can do open adoptions. You can choose the family. I have a friend who, I won't say her name but I'm sure she'd be fine with me sharing this story. She got pregnant, I think at 18 or 19, and she was not in a place to deal with that. She struggled with addiction. She struggled with her own personal issues in her life. I don't want to put her personal life on blast. She just was not in a place. But she was Catholic, and she thought, I at least should have this baby. And so she had the baby. And she gave the baby up for adoption. Now, really cool story. Turns out that the baby, who is now a grown man now, lives nearby. She knows where he is. He doesn't know where she is. She's given all the information to the parents, and whenever he wants to decide, she'll be arms open for him to come back. But she will tell you to this day that it was the best choice she ever made, the hardest choice she ever made, because he has a good life, because he has the life she would have wanted for her baby. But when you talk to her about this adoption experience, the thing you never hear her say that she will not say is, I really regret giving my baby up for adoption. Never. She'll never say, it was the worst experience of my life, and if I had to do it all over again, I would not do it. I would abort the baby. She never says that. She looks at pictures of him online. She knows where he is again, and he's grown into a very handsome and successful young man. And and he's in a loving family, and she gets to know that he's okay. That's not every adoptive mom doesn't have that privilege, but a birth mom doesn't have that privilege, but sometimes God works in crazy ways. You never know how he's going to come through for you. And for her, it's been only good things. Every year during the March for Life, she will always make a post on Facebook just telling women, hey, if you're pregnant and scared, hit me up. Totally confidential. Let me share with you my experience of making the very scary decision to carry this child to term and give this child up for adoption. And yes, it was hard. And yes, I suffered because of that, but I never think about what would have happened the other way around. It's only a good experience for her. So I do think that the argument of, well, I just could never give my baby up kind of gives away the plot, right? It kind of, then from that start, your premise is flawed, because your premise is that what you're carrying is a baby. So then what you're saying is, am I killing a baby, or am I not killing a baby? That is really the heart of the question of abortion and what we believe on it. And if you're saying I could never give this baby up, you're admitting that it's a baby, and you're admitting you already know you're going to love this. You already know that this is going to be a person that you will hold in your arms and see, a real flesh and blood live person. And you can't picture yourself parting from it. Again, yes, that's the argument I would make. And I think I understand, and I think this is the important part to remember too from the pro-life side, that when a woman says, I could never give my baby up for adoption, what she's saying is, I'm scared. I'm scared. And I think a lot of pro-lifers don't pay enough attention to the fear, and don't acknowledge the fear enough. The fear of pregnancy. I know there's a stereotype of pro-lifers that they're standing in front of abortion clinics with horrible images of fetuses and aborted fetuses. And I mean, it is horrible. It is horrible. I know a lot of people think that that's what the pro-life movement is. That's not what it is. There are some people who think that that's effective. I used to think it was really trashy until I actually stood. I was reporting on a story of pro-lifers. They were standing out there with their weird signs and their scary looking signs. And I actually was embedded myself in their group. I wanted to report on them. And I watched several people come up to them and say, "What, is this real?" And have a discussion. It opened a discussion. And those people went away going, "You know what? I didn't realize that's what this was." I actually have shown my children pictures online of what an abortion looks like, not because I'm cruel or because I'm like a fanatic, but because I have told each of them, I have a boy and a girl, and they're older now, a little bit older in their teens. And I have said, going forward in your life, people are going to ask you to make a judgment about this issue. People are going to ask you your opinion on this issue, and your opinion has to be your own. It can't be mine. You have to come to your own conclusions, but I want you to know what you're talking about when you say the word abortion. I covered that in the first episode of this series. I want you to have a picture in your mind of what it is. A lot of people talk about abortion, but they aren't really considering what it is. So I just want you to have all the information and know what you're talking about when you debate the subject of abortion. And then you go on and make your own opinions. Now, you might say, "Well, Kira, gosh, if they look at a picture of a burned baby, burned by that saline solution they inject into the younger fetuses," yeah, of course, abortion is gross. It's medical procedures. Any medical procedure is gross. So, of course, if you show a kid a picture of that, they're going to be repulsed. Yeah. Of course, you're making my argument for me. You're making the argument for those crazy people that stand with the posters. Yeah, no, duh. It does change how you look at it because it is a person. And when you see what's done to that person, it's like, ew, is there a better way to do this? And by the way, there is no better way to do it. I'm not even going to get into how an abortion is performed, particularly on a fetus that is already developed. It's too much. It's too much for this podcast. You just look it up yourself if you're so inclined. Let's get on to the issue of why abortion is pushed as some kind of help for the minority community, but it's a curse. It's really a curse. I want to talk about statistics first. Which group do you think has the most abortions? Black women. Black women, statistically speaking, they consume a larger portion for their population. Let me explain. I'm sorry. I'm getting a little in the weeds here. Okay, so 35%, these are numbers according to the CDC. 35% of aborted babies are Black. You may be saying, to me that's a lot, but you may be saying that's not so much. But it's a hell of a lot when you consider that only 6% of the population are Black women. Contrast that to white women who have 37% of the abortions. Oh, that's higher than Black women. But they are 77% of the population. Now you'd be saying, okay, Kira, well, that's because in America, stereotypically, Black people have been denied access to wealth, access to opportunity and education. They represent more of a lower income crowd. We have a lot of Black people live in the inner cities, and Black folks have struggled in this country forever. So it's not a surprise that more Black women seek out abortions because they can't really provide the family life that they want their baby to have. That's no surprise. To me, you're right. It is no surprise. But the reason it's no surprise is because it's deliberate. It's deliberate. The founder of the organization that became Planned Parenthood is Margaret Sanger. Now, I find just mentioning her name turns the conversation off because pro-lifers have used her name so much that it causes pro-choicers to just kind of flip the button. You've already heard a lot of talking points. Again, this is why this podcast is Just Listen to Yourself. Let's break the talking points down. So don't close off. Don't shut down. Let me make this argument for why Margaret Sanger actually was a very dangerous woman for the Black community and why her vision has actually been achieved, accidentally or no. So Margaret Sanger was an activist for birth control in the 1940s, a white woman, and she believed strongly in eugenics, but natural eugenics. So she believed that there were certain people that shouldn't be born because they represent a burden on the rest of society. And mostly she was referencing income, but at her time, a lot of the lower income people were Black. And so she called them the defective and diseased elements of humanity. I'm just quoting her now, and you can just Google that and look it up yourself. She believed that babies were a burden. She believed that women should be limited to the amount of children they can have, that people should have to get a license to have a kid. She believed that you should have a permit and you should not be, she believed in a one child per family. But here's the thing that is crazy. She wanted to aim this in the Black communities because she was alarmed at the rate at which Black Americans were reproducing. And she felt that they were a weaker race, that they needed to be cared for. In her time, her point of view was considered compassionate. And you can still find, I'm looking at an article right now that's written from the pro-choice side, because I always like to read both. And the person in this article is like making an argument for Margaret Sanger's arguments right now. We've just recycled these ideas and put new labels on them. But the idea that children are a burden to society and that we should really limit the types of kids that certain types of people can have, the pro-choice side is making this argument still to this day. It's just not in the terms Margaret Sanger made them. But she said, particularly in minority communities, because they are a burden, because they do typically tend to be lower income and they put a more of a burden on society and their own families, that they need to be kind of reined in with their reproduction rates. And she said, here's the thing that's diabolical. What she said was, we need to hire Black ministers because the Black church is very powerful in the Black community. It still is. The church is still one of the most powerful and influential institutions in the Black community. That's why politicians are always going to churches. And that's why, that we have a whole hierarchy of the church thing in the Black community. It goes all the way back to days when we didn't have power anywhere else. So we amassed it in church. And Margaret Sanger knew that. And so she said, we need to secure some ministers so that when we go into these neighborhoods and we tell these people, this is for your own good, that they don't hear it as, we just don't want any more Black people. We don't want them to hear it as that. I'll read you the quote. We should hire 3 or 4 colored ministers, preferably with social service backgrounds and with engaging personalities. The most successful educational approach to the Negro is through a religious appeal. We don't want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it occurs to any of their more rebellious members. I don't see any kind of interpretation. By the way, that quote is from Woman, Morality, and Birth Control, published in 1922. And then here's another one from 1934 from an essay she wrote called America Needs a Code for Babies. Give dysgenic groups, that's people with bad genes, in our population their choice of segregation or compulsory sterilization. Give dysgenic groups, people with bad genes. Now, isn't it funny that whenever we argue about history in this country, we contend that basically every white person before 1980 in America was a racist, even if they didn't know it, because they were part of a racist institution. And yet the pro-choice side will defend Margaret Sanger as not racist, but progressive, even though she most certainly is racist. She's saying there are people with bad genes. And who do you think the people with bad genes were in her time? They were the same people that have always been the, quote, people with bad genes in this country. And that's African Americans. It's Black people. We've always been the undesirables. We've always been the marginalized. We've always been the segregated. We've always been the oppressed. Always, 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 all the time. She's not talking about anyone different. She's talking about us. She's talking about us. She didn't think we deserved to reproduce because we had bad genes. By the way, she also thought this about kids that were born with disabilities. Down syndrome kids, out the window. We've got a Down syndrome genocide. Kids born with Down syndrome are real people. Have you ever worked with any or known any? They're real everyday people like you and me. They have different cognitive abilities, but a lot of them are just normal people who live normal lives, and their families love them. And I think the statistics are in America right now, I think 97% or something like that of Down's kids are aborted. That's a genocide. If you think that that's compassionate, then I would implore you to go and work with Down syndrome parents, Down syndrome kids, people who volunteer in the Down syndrome world, and you'll see they're just as happy to be alive as the rest of us. And their parents are too. So Sanger had that idea. She placed Black people in the same category as everybody else who was defective. And to her, that was compassionate, by the way. That was compassion. Because she felt like all of these people were burdening society, burdening their families, and making it more difficult for society to advance, because we're always having to take care of people. That's such a weird argument to make, too. Now, I don't think it's weird for Margaret Sanger because she was a racist. But it's a weird argument when I hear people make, when they say that, when people say, well, we can't burden society with these people that are undesirable, with kids that are born with diseases that will require care for the rest of their lives, or without limbs, or whatever kind of, quote, abnormality they're born with, that it burdens us. And we never think about it from the point of view of what it does, what it gives to us, what it offers us. I mean, when we eliminate every person we have to care for in society, what also are we eliminating? We're eliminating the lessons you learn by sacrificing for another person who can't express thanks. We learn the lessons that you learn when you give of yourself unselfishly. We learn lessons from people who don't think like us and who don't look like us and who have a different thing to offer than any able-bodied person does. We deny ourselves those things. We deny ourselves the blessing of serving other people and what it does to change your view of the world and your place in it, and the compassion that it engenders in you to care for someone who can't care for themselves. We're not just denying those people life, we're denying our own selves the gift as a society. I recognize that it's hard for each individual family. I'm like you. I wouldn't want to have to go through that any more than any of you all will. I'm just saying, ask anybody who's been through it. There is value in it. Ask anyone who has cared for a dying parent, a parent suffering from Alzheimer's. It's painful and horrific and soul crushing, and they wouldn't have it any other way, because it changed who they were and changed how they looked at serving other people and at life, and it changed their value of life. So we're not just robbing these people of life, we're robbing ourselves from the experience of the blessings of caring for others. That is a blessing that you can't get anywhere else. You can't get in any other way. So Margaret Sanger really felt like it was a burden to ask society to care for people who can't care for themselves. And a lot of those people were Black people, to Margaret Sanger. Now, let's get off that issue of race. You can look it up for yourself and make your own decisions. There is some controversy. I don't see it, but I think that the pro-choice side does a little bit of cherry picking. There is some controversy as to whether or not she really was racist, but I think just even historically speaking, that's not even a question. I just think a lot of pro-choicers hate that argument that the pro-life side makes, because it's a good one about abortion being a racial attack in some ways. And so they feel motivated to defend Sanger is not a racist when simply by virtue of being a white woman alive when she probably was a racist. But you make those decisions for yourself. Okay. So, why do I think Margaret Sanger's mission A, changed, and B, was successful? Well, Margaret Sanger's mission turned into Planned Parenthood. And certainly Planned Parenthood does not have an official eugenics policy aimed at the Black community. I really don't think that if you went into their secret files, you're going to see our mission is to eliminate all Black Americans. I definitely don't believe that. And there are a lot of pro-choicers who say, you know what? You're right about Margaret Sanger. You're absolutely right. There's more people actually that say that than not. It's not that controversial. She was a racist, but to be fair, the mission has changed. It's not like that anymore. Just like the rest of American society has evolved, so has Planned Parenthood. So you can't really put this on Margaret Sanger. And okay, that's fair. I think that's a fair point. But when I look around and I see that there are, I think 7 times, I think that I didn't look this up before the podcast, and I'm sorry, I'll put it in the show notes maybe. I think there are 7 times more Planned Parenthoods in Black communities than in white communities. 35% of the abortions belong to 6% of the female population, which is Black. And in New York City, more Black babies are aborted than born alive. It sounds to me like Margaret Sanger's mission was pretty damn successful. We're the only minority group in the United States that isn't growing at a steady rate. We're the only ones. We actually did increase. It was 12%, and I think we're up to now like 12.7 or 12.8, maybe 12.9%. So there's been a slight increase. I attribute that to the increase in wealth, in Black wealth in this country. We're starting to see that go up, and it's changing the dynamics of how we have families and raise them. That's just an opinion, though. I don't have any stats to back this up. But it looks to me like Margaret Sanger's mission was pretty good, because I can tell you, when we lived in Gary, Indiana, I could have walked to 2 from my house. 2, not 1, 2 in either direction. I live in sunny, bright, white Orange County right now, and I couldn't tell you where the nearest Planned Parenthood is. I don't walk by any in my neighborhood. 2 in my Black neighborhood in Gary, Indiana. Sounds to me like Margaret Sanger's mission was pretty damn successful. And here's the other reason why I think all Black Americans should be in favor of life and should really oppose abortion. Outside of our religious values, which 87% of Black Americans consider themselves to be practicing Christians. I actually think that number's higher, but that's the only verifiable statistic I could find. So outside of the religious views of that, the one thing that Black Americans are always complaining about, and rightfully so, is we don't have a seat at the political table, that we don't have enough of a seat in government, that we are not influential enough in policy, in corporate America, that we're not getting the representation we need. But we are literally killing off our political capital. Literally. So I saw an estimate that said last year alone, 3 million Black babies were aborted. 3 million? Gosh, can that be right? That's a lot. It's a lot. It might not be 3 million. Maybe that seems so high. I'll look into that, but it's a lot. But just, I don't care if it's 60,000, if it's 10,000. We're almost 13% of the population now. What would this country look like if we were 20% of the population? What would this country look like if we were 35% of the population, which is the portion of the abortions that we represent? If Black America was 35% of the American population, that's almost half. Can you imagine how different everything would look? Can you imagine how different your neighborhood would look? Your schools, government? We would have had a Barack Obama long before we got to Barack Obama. That's a lot of Black people that we have just wiped out of existence. That's all our political capital. All our political capital getting scraped away. So I do think that Black people have a vested interest in opposing abortion. And I hate the argument. Not to offend those of you who are making it, but I have to say, I hate the argument that says that abortion is some kind of gift to the Black community. It's always like white folks pushing that on us. Oh, it's a gift. You don't need your kids. Don't worry about it. We're going to have our kids. We're going to raise our kids. We're still going to be, 77% of this population. We're going to raise our kids in good families and give them opportunities, but it's never going to be okay for you. So let us give you this gift of abortion, and then you never have to worry about it. You never have to worry about your Black kid growing up to be a Black senator or a Black congressman or the second Black president of the United States or the first Black female president of the United States or a Supreme Court justice. You don't have to worry about those pesky little things. Let us take care of it. No, thank you. White people are always trying to divest Black people of things they need. Sorry to all my white family and friends that that this doesn't fit you. I love you all. You're the best. Hey, some of my best friends are white. It's fine. But when I look at it from the point of view of the progressive, I guess, left or left of center people who always use race as some kind of defense of their position, that's what I think. I think, okay, well, listen, what I see is a bunch of white people telling a lot of Black women that they don't need their babies. And they're going to help them get rid of those babies because even though those babies represent future taxpayers, future wealth, future income, future education, a future seat at that political table. Oh, you don't need those. Don't worry about it. We got it. I'm going to send Hillary around every 4 years, and whoever the next white Democrat is, we'll send her around your churches every 4 years, and we'll tell you that everything's going to be fine. You have us. You don't need your kids. And that's what they say about guns, too. I've got a great Second Amendment episode you can go back and listen to. I think it was my second or third episode. And that is one of my biggest problems with the gun control crowd, is that I always feel like it's a lot of white people going like, don't worry about people. You don't need your guns. Like, we got you. We got your back. I don't think so. I've been looking at history, and it's been pretty bleak for Black people whenever we're not allowed to own guns. So I think that the argument that it is a gift to the minority community is a lie. It's a dirty lie, to be honest, and I don't think we should be buying it. I can't convince you one way or the other to believe where life starts and to be pro-life or pro-choice. And I don't condemn you if you're pro-choice, and I don't. You have a place in my home, even still. I believe that we are on the same side in respect to the idea that, at least most of us anyway, most of us are not Margaret Sanger. Most of us are just people who want a better life for our fellow citizens. And so you look and you see this baby's going to really impede this woman's life, and I want her to have a better life. And I get that. I do. And I feel the same way. I want her to have a better life too, but I know that her life will be better if she allows this child to live. I know it will be, because she has so many options and so much help, and there is something just so magical, and magical is such a silly word to use. I can't think of the word right now, but paradigm shifting about having a kid. It changes how you view everything, and it makes you a better person, even if you don't get to raise that kid. Okay, I'm going to end this abortion argument here. I hope that I have at least made some points to you that you find interesting, and I would love to hear your responses. Go ahead and hit me up on Twitter at realkiradavis, or you can join my Facebook page. Just look up Real Kira Davis on Facebook as well. And I want to thank, of course, the FCB Radio Network, all of our friends and fans out there. You've been so wonderful. I'm still working on that Patreon, but I've got some great bonus stuff for you guys. So I'm really excited to offer you some of this stuff. Hey, listen, until we come together again, I just want to remind you all, no matter what your point of view is on anything, to approach your arguments with grace. First and foremost, grace for the person you're arguing with, and then just to take some time and stop and just listen to yourself every once in a while before you start making your arguments. Thank you so much, guys. I'll talk to you next week. Bye.